Well, I'm going to file you under part of the problem.
Just when you think public trust in science can't go lower, some of the most famous scientists in America decide to defend the indefensible. We're going to break down all this and so much more on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where I take on the craziest ideas from across our politics, media, and the internet, all from an independent perspective. Up first, we've got to check in on Bill Maher over on HBO, who just hosted the astrophysicist and popular scientist Neil Degrasse Tyson. Their conversation got heated when Tyson decided to defend, or at least refuse to criticize, the politicization of science that we've witnessed. The most recent example, and the context you need for this clip, is that the editor of Scientific American, one of the country's most historic and prestigious scientific publications, had to resign after a bunch of unhinged anti-Trump tweets posted after the election result totally called into credibility her ability to actually be fair and be the editor of a supposedly unbiased and objective source. You'd think it would be pretty simple for one of America's most famous scientists to say, yeah, politicizing science like that is probably bad. But for whatever reason, Degrasse Tyson was not willing to do so. Take a listen.
Scientific American, the magazine. I remember when it was around when I was
grew up with it, yeah.
Grew up with it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, their editor had to quit. You saw this.
Yeah, I heard about it because she expressed some opinions, right? Yeah.
Well, no, she didn't just express some opinions. She called about half the country that voted for Donald Trump bigoted and fascist, which, seeing as her publication also openly endorsed one candidate, Kamala Harris, over the other, totally eviscerates their ability to be any sort of objective source. So yeah, that's a failure in leadership and something she should resign for, not just a different opinion.
Okay, sure, but it sure didn't sound scientific. It didn't sound like the person I would want to be running Scientific American.
Okay.
It was a rant on Twitter. Okay, I could read it to you. It's really ugly. You know, I apologize to younger voters that my Gen X is so full of fascists. Okay, I'm not.
Okay, I'm not a gasket right there.
I'm not for.
All right. Yeah.
I'm not for canceling anybody on either side.
Yeah.
So But here's what I think is the scandal.
What?
This is in Scientific American.
Yeah.
Less than a year ago. Inequity between male and female athletes is a result not of inherent biological differences between the sexes, but of biases in how they are treated in sports. That's nuts. And it sure ain't scientific, and it's in Scientific American.
Yeah, Bill's exactly right here. This is the real problem. It's not that one editor tweeted nasty things about Trump voters. It's that the actual publication itself, Scientific American, which is like the face of science journalism in America, has been politicized, has been captured by a left-wing ideology. Because to make the statement, and I actually encountered this in college in my gender studies class, they made the similar argument that, well, the reason that men outperform women in most sports is because of societal inequities. Men and boys have more resources available early on. Now, that may play a piece of it, right? A small piece of it. But even the athletes with all the resources in the world, raised from birth with private trainers who had athlete parents, male and female, there are still massive biological differences between the sexes that manifest themselves in sports. But you have the leading scientific publication in America saying that's not true. That's the real scandal. I agree with Bill. It's much more important. Their actual coverage is anti-scientific, pseudoscientific nonsense, pushing an ideology, not actually trying to explore facts or truth or get closer to finding out answers to the questions that Americans are curious about. That's the real problem. But Degrasse Tyson really doesn't seem that concerned by it.
And that's why the Democrats lost the election. It's true.
Bill, every 20 minutes on your platform, you come up with another reason why the Democrats lost. No. You already have the answer. They lost the election. So anything you say is why
true.
They did it.
So obviously, Bill's kind of joking here. What Scientific American publishes is not why Kamala lost the election, right? But there's a grain of truth to this idea that the wokeification of progressive institutions, of mainstream media, of the Democratic Party, and increasingly becoming out of touch with reality and with the realities that everyday people experience, does factor into a big part of the reason for the rise of Donald Trump and the success of the Republican Party. Big picture, these things are connected. But obviously, that's not what decided this specific election. Like, people weren't talking about Scientific American much in the build up to the race, but he's got a point if you think about it on a bigger thematic level. But obviously, I mean, Neil is right to say that's not actually why Kamala lost, but he seems totally unwilling to even acknowledge that this ideology is holding back the center left and the far left at all electorally, when it just seems obvious that that is true. That's the crazy thing to me. Neil Degrasse Tyson isn't responsible for what somebody wrote in Scientific American a year ago, but he seems to always defend the indefensible and just defend institutions reflexively. I mean, if I was a scientist or a public intellectual who speaks about science and tries to gin up interest in science and curiosity like Neil Degrasse Tyson does, I would quickly want to distance myself and distance science from this kind of insane pseudoscientific activism and say, that's not us. Kind of the way I do with the LGBT community as a gay person. I'm like, listen, the non-binary, neo-pronoun stuff really has nothing to do with us. So don't judge us based on that. That's how I would approach the science thing if I was in his shoes. But he seems, and maybe he's just afraid of Twitter. Maybe he's just afraid, or Blue Sky. There is the app they're all on now. Maybe he's just afraid of backlash, but it's so wild that he won't just say, yeah, that's bad.
Well, does she still have her job?
No, not because of this. I said the scandal is not her tweet. The scandal,
Because that was like a year ago, was it? Which one was a year ago?
I think a year ago, women still couldn't beat men in basketball or any other sport. And it wasn't because of society. You don't see a problem
By the way,
here?
long-distance swimming, women might actually have the advantage. You can look into that. Yeah.
Maybe long-distance swimming,
Yeah.
yes. Okay.
Yeah. I've looked into it. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to file you under part of the problem.
Ooh, Bill cooks him there at the end, but he's right. Neil Degrasse Tyson is part of the problem. I mean, bringing up the example of long-distance swimming, where I think there is actually some scientific evidence that females may have an advantage, is not an argument applied to all sports except long-distance swimming. If anything, it just reaffirms the reality that there are meaningful differences between the biological sexes that require sex segregation in sports. But even on that issue, in other places, Tyson has said he doesn't really believe in that and wants to do away with strict sex segregation of sports. So he is a science denialist on this issue of sports medicine and the realities of biological sex, yet he's also one of America's leading public scientists and commentators. It's not a great look for the scientific community, who of course didn't elect him. It's more the mainstream media has propped him up, but still it's an unfortunate representation that will increasingly make people turn against these institutions and stop trusting them. And that has serious consequences. One of the reasons I'm so concerned about this politicization of science and this self-immolation of their credibility of places like Scientific American is that you then have normie Americans lose trust in scientists. We saw this a lot in COVID, and understandably so, but then they start believing opposite things that are also not true, and they don't have skepticism for those, whether it's not giving their kids basic childhood vaccinations or all sorts of other things that have very harmful consequences because they no longer trust scientists. Yes, individuals and parents are responsible for those choices, but so are the scientists who went woke, who went political, and set their own credibility on fire, and now people don't listen to them. And it's really concerning, but if people like Neil Degrasse Tyson keep taking this approach, it's only going to continue. I found the whole conversation with him on Bill Maher really disappointing and kind of emblematic of everything that's wrong with the trajectory of just the popular face of science in America. You know, this guy is not representative of your average scientists and researchers in a lab somewhere doing good work, but he and many others like him, Bill Nye, the science guy who's not a climate scientist, but seems to constantly speak about climate, these guys they do real harm to the public image and trust in these institutions, just like the Dr. Fauci's of the world have done. And that's going to have real consequences if they keep going down this path. It really is. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments section. Do make sure you're subscribed and hit that like button while you're at it. Remember to comment with your thoughts, because I do take the time to read the comments and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. Plus, if you leave your comment with a super chat or a super thanks, I'll definitely respond to it on tomorrow's show. And now it's time for Brad versus TikTok, my daily segment where I take on the craziest ideas from the Clock app.
Pronoun of the day is slugs.
Today, this feminist TikToker is spiraling and losing her mind on camera. So this liberal woman, who's a big Kamala supporter, is putting on an actual Handmaid's Tale outfit, recording herself with the caption, "Portal from 2034," and both pre-Trump's election and post-Trump's election, posting these skits intended to show what life will be like under Trump. And they are actually among the most unhinged things I've ever seen on TikTok, which, guys, that's saying something. Take a look at this first one.
Oh my God, congrats, ladies, we did it. This is, as you know, a portal, and it's actually 2034. And we got Trump elected in 2024, so exciting. What else happened? We wear these cute outfits, and get ready with me is so easy. I'm ready.
So on screen, she put, "We haven't had to vote since," which, guys, it's just all so delusional. Women losing the right to vote is not a thing. It's not something Trump wants to do. It's not something he even could do if he wanted to. It's in the Constitution. The whole thing is bizarre and kind of offensive to the actual struggles that women go through in many places of the world where they are oppressed, to cosplay their oppression like this. I did have to laugh at the bit where she's like, "Get ready with me are so easy now." Like, if this wasn't serious, because this chick is for real. I checked out her page and she talks a lot about Project 2025 and this will be Trump's America. She's not like making fun of woke white women. If so, this would be kind of amazing. It's actually insane. She thinks this is what's going to happen, or at least something like this might happen. Nobody is going to force you to wear Handmaid's Tale outfits. That's some of the most Delulu, hysterical nonsense I've seen on the Clock app in a minute. And apparently this woman also thinks, in another post she did where she tried to encourage Republican women to vote for Kamala, that if they don't, they might not go to school or work anymore in just a few years, in her portal from 2034.
Hey, I just want to jump on here real quick and talk about some of the positives of, voting for Trump and Vance 8 years ago. Getting ready is so easy. Like when you're going to school. I mean, well, we don't go to school anymore, but going to work women don't go to work anymore either. But I mean, can you imagine? But it's so easy. This is what you wear. And this is my wedding dress. I got married. So that's a positive.
Y'all, she really did hit the crack pipe. And she needs to put it down. Like, she has had enough. Women no longer working. What? Trump? Actually, and you can make so many criticisms about Trump and women, but this just isn't one of them. He just appointed the first female chief of staff. And he appointed a bunch of women to his cabinet. Like, this is mental illness. This is actually diagnosable, certifiable mental illness. And you should seek help, not spread this fear and panic to the whole world and to countless thousands upon thousands of women who've seen this video and might in some small way take it seriously. That is not a good legacy to be leaving on the world through the internet, making people paranoid and scaring them with fake scenarios that aren't real. And I don't know, I could be wrong. Maybe she has spoken out about it somewhere, but something tells me this creator hasn't actually spoken about the plight of women in Muslim majority countries in the Middle East, which often actually does resemble The Handmaid's Tale, at least in some ways. But yes, Trump Vance's America is going to be like this. Like, give me a break. And it's crazy too, because some of the issues like related to abortion and other things play favorably for Democrats with a lot of people, but they just can't help themselves. Some of these online progressives from just going off the plot, losing the plot and taking it all to the nth degree and just coming off as lunatics. Now, this one is actually like profoundly offensive because she's either through makeup or through some graphical effect on TikTok, I can't quite tell, given herself a black eye and a bloody nose with this video message from 2034, where she writes in the caption that JD Vance believes we need to get rid of no-fault divorce, meaning that women should stay in marriages that are violent.
Another great thing that's happened since Trump and Vance got elected 10 years ago. We stay together for the kids. Doesn't matter what's happening in the marriage at all. So it's very pro-family.
Is it just me, or is it actually offensive to survivors of domestic violence to cosplay their trauma to make political points and cheap partisan shots that are not based in reality? First of all, the Trump administration is not going to get rid of no-fault divorce. I think that's a state-level debate anyway, and I don't think that will even happen at the state level. But even if they did, physical abuse is one of the faults that you can cite and get a divorce, even in absence of no-fault divorce. Now, would there be problems with women having to prove that in court in order to obtain a divorce? Yes, which is one of the reasons why I don't want to get rid of no-fault divorce, but that's not going to happen. It's all just more fear-mongering and alarmism. Like, that is not going to happen. If I'm wrong, I will come on here and I will admit it and tell you all that I'm just absolutely have no credibility at all. But I promise you, I do not think that is going to happen. And such a serious topic should be discussed seriously, like tethered to the facts. And maybe you want to say, hey, some conservatives do oppose no-fault divorce, and that would be really harmful. And that is true. Some do out there. But to dress up like a battered wife, even with the blood and the eye makeup for a little skit for the internet, I don't know. Maybe I'm being a snowflake, but I find that deeply distasteful. Now, this woman also has a very nuanced and sophisticated explanation for the MAGA movement and why people support Trump over Harris.
Trump and Vance did win in 2024. It's 2034 now. Remember how we were all chanting MAGA, make America great again, which is fun. Loved it. It actually meant, man, aren't girls assholes? You gotta laugh about it.
Yeah, people who support Trump all just hate women. There couldn't be any other explanation. It couldn't have anything to do with inflation or border policy or economics or foreign policy or anything else. They must all just be misogynists, including the millions and millions of women who voted for Trump. They must just all think women are assholes. Nobody is buying this anymore. And I mean, they can keep pushing this crap. And it worked more in 2016, where people really did believe them when they just constantly said racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, two-spirit phobia, whatever. But like, they've overdone it so much. They've cried wolf so many times. They've just thrown these labels around like candy on Halloween that no one takes them seriously. And people... You can't scream racism and sexism to explain an election where huge amounts of minorities and women voted for the sexist and racist side. Like, it's got to be about more than that, okay? It's got to be. And you're not helping your own side by doing this kind of Delulu denialism. You're actually totally ignoring the ways in which your side and your candidate failed, which means you're going to repeat the mistakes. Now, thankfully, I do see some mainstream Democratic politicians and media commentators actually having a conversation about what went wrong and trying to talk about what they need to do differently. But internet activists, on the other hand, are still firmly in Delulu land. Oh, I had to suffer through this woman's TikTok page at great length because it kept showing them to me and I kept seeing them and being like, this is crazy, and then watching them and it kept showing me more and more and more. So I had to feel that pain. So you all do too, because that's how this works. So you're welcome. Thank you for suffering through it with me. Make sure you hit that like button to reward my suffering and do comment with your thoughts below. And now we got to talk politics for a minute, because our government is actually being run and staffed by liberal snowflakes. You just can't make this up. But the Biden-Harris administration's State Department held therapy sessions that turned into crying sessions for employees and staff after Trump won the election. All of this on the taxpayer dime, of course. Here's some reporting from the Washington Free Beacon. Managing stress during change. The Biden-Harris State Department holds therapy session after Trump win. That's reassuring, right? That the nation's top diplomats need therapy sessions at work if the election doesn't go their way. The reporting continues. The Biden-Harris State Department organized an in-house therapy session for employees early Friday following Donald Trump's election victory. 4 sources with knowledge of the meeting told the Washington Free Beacon. Managing stress during change, read an internal State Department email sent across the agency that encouraged employees to attend a 1-hour session in which they could discuss their feelings about Tuesday's election results. The department's employee consultation services in the Bureau of Medical Services hosted the session, according to a copy of the email notice described by sources to the Free Beacon. So this is a medical issue from the medical department coming in to help people cope with the psychological stress and distress from Trump winning. I wonder, would they have done the same if Kamala had won for the Trump supporting staff there, as few as there probably are? I think we all know the answer. But there's more. Because there always is when it comes to our government. The State Department's Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs, which oversees American diplomacy in the war-torn Middle East, also held a group discussion Friday with Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs Barbara Leaf and Acting Undersecretary for Political Affairs John Bass. So this meeting, with the diplomats assigned to some of the most heated areas of conflict in the world, these are going to be serious people who don't cry and don't melt down and can get on with business, right? Right? One source described the meeting as a cry session over Trump's victory, which is likely to usher in wholesale change at Foggy Bottom, which is where the State Department is headquartered. They are said to have discussed the difficulty of Trump's victory and urged employees to share their feelings in private settings. I mean, clearly, if this story is anything to go by, wholesale change is needed at the State Department, for sure. Because, call me crazy, but I think people with the emotional and mental resilience of fully functioning adults should probably be in charge of American diplomacy, not liberal snowflakes who melt down and need a cuddling session if their candidate loses an election, especially when they're supposed to be neutral public servants with no political ideology or agenda, and they're doing this all on the taxpayer dime. Now, maybe this was a one-off, right? Maybe the election was just so heated and people had such strong emotions about it that they had to take this unusual step. Oh, no. They do this kind of thing semi-regularly, apparently. The State Department also held in-house therapy sessions in May 2023 after a system-wide email glitch assigned random and often incorrect pronouns to employees. The horror! How could anyone ever survive being assigned an incorrect pronoun by a robot? The agency urged any employee who feels upset or hurt as a result of this unfortunate mistake to use its mental health services, the Free Beacon reported at the time. Come on now, y'all have got to be kidding me. Am I being punked? Is Ashton Kutcher about to come out of a wall here like, you're being punked? Like, the Gen Zers won't know what I'm talking about, but like this feels like it can't be real. This should go without saying. But if you need therapy because somebody used the incorrect pronoun for you, you belong in an inpatient program getting serious mental health help. And I don't mean that to be rude. I mean that seriously. Like, you need to build coping skills and resilience with a professional. You do not belong running American diplomacy in one of the most important federal agencies. This is fine. All of this is fine. There's nothing to see here. Everything is running smoothly. The government is doing amazing with our tax dollars, and we should just all be so grateful that these amazing, highly professional, competent patriots are steering our country towards success. Let me know what you think in the comments below of this crazy story. I can't believe, y'all, it's only Monday. How are we going to get through a week of this? And now I'll round out today's show by catching up on some of your comments that you guys have left on recent episodes. One person writes, "Thank you for a few minutes of normal." I love that. Maybe that needs to be the new catchphrase for this podcast. Another person writes, "I have to point out, Parker kept framing Trump's civil liability as RAPE, but the jury distinctly found him not liable for that, but liable for SA, sexual abuse. There's your disinformation. Also, from my perspective, propagandic fear-mongering would shove me out of the Democratic Party." Yes, you are correct about that ruling, though that had to do with the technical definition of RAPE under New York law, so it's kind of a complicated wormhole that I just didn't want to get into in that moment, but you are correct. Another person says, "Serious question. Am I homophobic for thinking that we should not allow surgical procedures and or anatomical fumigation for anyone suffering from Ekbom syndrome. After all, even if there isn't medical evidence to support their claims, if they believe and feel that bugs are inside them, then we must affirm it, right? So I had to look that up. That's a new one for me, but apparently this refers to a psychological disorder where people believe incorrectly that there are like bugs burrowed inside of them, which, holy crap, that's terrifying. But no, of course we shouldn't do that kind of thing or affirm such a belief, which is one of the problems with the progressive line of thinking that allows for people to have their truth, or that you must affirm someone's identity always. Like, actually, no, there does have to be a limit to that, in fact. If you ever decide to offer a premium tier where we can monthly subscribe and pay for extra content, I'm in. You have lots of comments I don't agree with, but your perspectives make me think, and I value you helping me to not exist in a political echo chamber. Keep being awesome. Thank you. I love that. And of course, you guys don't always have to agree with my perspectives, but I do want to make you think. And maybe you still disagree, but at least then you're more fortified in your belief and you know more about the other perspective. Yeah, I am open to doing this. I just would need to know, what kind of content would you want? Would you want a Q&A? Would you want a live stream where we're all on a call? Like, what would you want? Let me know in the comments below and I can figure out if it's something I can do or not. Another person wrote, when you asked Parker to put himself in other people's shoes and he couldn't, I lost all respect for him. He automatically went to argue his side. Peak immaturity. I appreciate you trying, Brad. Yeah, I think in order to be a sophisticated political thinker, you really do have to be able to put yourself in the other side's shoes. And I try to be able to do that. I tell you, sometimes I can't, but I really do always try. Another person wrote, well, I covered it on Fox News at the time, so gosh, I love you, Brad. I needed that so much. Don't know if I'll watch this kid again. He didn't hear a word you said. He got so excited when he thought you were a fellow guilty until proven evil Trump hater. I think he forgot you had a brain. He doesn't think human rights are immutable. Yeah, that's where Parker and I disagree for sure. I don't want to take away people's human rights willy-nilly based on a low burden of proof, but I guess I'm the crazy one. Another person said about the blue bracelet trend, blue bracelet so they know who they can trust and who they'll be safe with and love by the most hateful, hypocritical, close-minded, mentally ill, unhinged, unrealistic, racist, sexist, untrustworthy, out-of-touch, bitter group of people I have ever seen in my 50 years of life. Well, tell me how you really feel about the woke crowd. I mean, these people need to get a grip on how to cope with other people who don't have the same beliefs that they do. Welcome to the real world. Now deal with it. I'm actually embarrassed for these people and quite sick of their childish behavior. I agree with you that I think the whole blue bracelet thing is incredibly childish and so ridiculous. Another person says, I was a person who has been abused as a child and as an adult. I know I don't remember the dates when I was a child, but I carry psychological markers from it. I cannot forget the dates and specific details of each assault as an adult. I don't buy E. Jean Carroll's or Ford's stories. They simply don't have any key details that zero adult victims forget. In fact, a lot of childhood victims also remember specific facts. Frankly, Trump has a lot of flaws. We know at least at one point he was not gentlemanly about women. He cheated multiple times, but I also believe people can change. I firmly believe that these women are simply feeling slighted, but any activity was consensual and they are looking for a payday. I wonder what these people would think if they were wrongfully accused and found liable for SA. Yeah, I understand your perspective, and that's what I tried to explain to Parker, is that people aren't like knowingly supporting someone who hurt women for various reasons that we can discuss and debate. They don't believe that he did that. So it's just a different story than if they, oh yeah, he did that and we all believe it and we support him anyway. That would obviously be kind of messed up, but that's not the actual perspective that most Trump supporters have. But he seemed to want to mostly focus on that kind of straw man version. Another person wrote, adolescents don't realize how little they really know. He's fortunate that you took the time to talk to him. Thank you. Well, I enjoyed the conversation at least somewhat, and he's got a big platform. So if I can help him maybe use it a little bit less misleadingly in the future, I'll count that a win. And when I started doing this stuff when I was still 19, 20, 21 in college, and I agree, one thing I didn't always have was humility about the limits to my own knowledge and how little I did know as a 21-year-old. It's easy when you're that young to kind of get, and I'm still young, I know, I just turned 27, but you can get caught up in this kind of zeal, like this revolutionary zeal, like I've discovered the truth about the world and everyone else could see it, we'd fix our problems. But you actually, as you grow up, realize that there's a reason that a lot of these problems have persisted and weren't easily solved by past generations. And if they weren't complicated, if they really were so simple, they wouldn't still be with us today. Another person writes, "Hi, Brad. First of all, I want to say thank you and kudos to your guest for going on your show and debating you. I think these kinds of conversations are hugely important. We need people who can bridge the gap. I lived through October 7, and I cannot forgive the left for turning their backs on us while we lived through the worst trauma that has ever been inflicted on us. To this young creator, I'd like to say, you are so fixated on the woman Trump allegedly assaulted. Do you have any sympathy at all for the thousands of women violated at the Nova Festival? Do you care about the women trying to tell the left that they do not want men in their personal spaces? Do you care about women at all, or are you just using this particular woman because she fits your narrative? That's what I'm wondering. Thank you again, Brad." Hey, look, I don't know. First off, I'm so sorry to hear you went through that horrible experience and what a nightmare that must have been. I don't know what Parker's views are on Israel, but I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt and say he probably does oppose the October 7 attack. At least I hope. But like I said, I don't know, so I don't want to make any statement about what his beliefs are. Another person writes, "Dude, I love Brad. I'm totally a Republican, definitely not conservative, but I do enjoy and agree with quite a few of his views. But in this video, I really admired how easily and concisely he was able to deliver his points and ask perfectly pointed questions. I think more people from both sides really should watch Brad and folks like him because he's basically right in the middle, and ultimately that is where everyone needs to meet for there to be a semblance of peace. Love ya, Brad." Thank you, and I love all of you guys who tune in so much as well, and we actually just passed 150,000 subscribers, so that's a huge landmark, and it's you guys who are making it possible. Another person wrote, "Whatever happened to Sister Act Whoopi, Star Trek Whoopi, literally anything else Whoopi? Wait, Whoopi was in Star Trek? I didn't know that. I mean, honestly, I guess I'm too young to know that much about her acting career. I mostly know her as Whoopi from The View, which is not the best version of Whoopi, I would imagine." Someone else writes, "The ones wearing blue bracelets are also the ones who don't attend town halls, district meetings, or vote in every election, which is every 2 years. The bare minimum to make change is to be engaged with your local community. However, I guess Michaels has a sick deal on beads." That one made me laugh there at the end. It really did. Another person says, "I go to anime conventions all the time, and when in cosplay, you will have women dressed as men that look like actual men. But the trans women in these spaces are so difficult to spot that I once had to ask if one was okay with me helping her change as she was a trans woman. Needless to say, trans people are not the issue. The crazy predators are, even in the most liberal of spaces." Yeah, I know. I mean, before this became a big issue, like 10 years ago, you did have trans people using bathrooms and blending in, and it wasn't the big issue it is today. But now it's become that issue, not because of actual transsexual people, but because of fetishists, because of pervs, because of ideologues who declare themselves non-binary with a full beard and want to go in the women's room. It's like these are the people that are the problem, not genuine trans people who have been around for a long time. Another person writes, "Brad, if you're going to do a segment on RFK Jr., you really need to actually read his book, The Real Anthony Fauci, or at the very least sit through his Rogan appearance. People like to debunk him without ever actually looking at the data he's using to validate his positions. Please don't be the everybody knows guy." Yeah, I'll get to it eventually. I'm going to do my research, and I probably won't read his whole book, but maybe I will go back and watch again. I watched some of it at the time, but watch again his full Rogan appearance. I don't hate him. I don't think he's the worst thing in the world. I think he has some good points, but I do have concerns about some of the things he believes that seem conspiratorial and not based in evidence or reality to me. Another person writes, "Hey Brad, in my opinion, minimum wage increases only benefits the government and no one else. The government makes a percentage of the amount of money the worker makes. The company passes the wage increase onto the consumer, or they will expect the workers to be more productive or just have them work less." Yes, although I think the rising prices also hurt the government. I think more than that, it helps them in the sense that they can campaign on, look how much I did, look how much I helped. And if people aren't actually better off, they'll just think they are because the law passed and the number on their paycheck went up. But why did everything get expensive? Why did my hours get reduced? People aren't great at looking beyond the first order consequences of something into the second or third order. And so that's why things like, oh, $20 minimum wage sound great for politicians because they can pretend to be heroes and the long-term consequences of what they do won't actually fall back on them. Another person writes, "Reschool choice. States allowing private schools to hire teachers without degrees and certification is a feature and not a bug. Teacher licensing is a scam by unions. You don't need a degree to be a good teacher. Why do you need a degree to teach third graders math and hand out juice?" You know, I'm not sure I'm 100% on board with what you're saying here, but I do agree that, like, if these schools are hiring terrible, unqualified teachers, parents aren't going to just choose to send their kids to that school. Like, the system does keep itself in check through accountability and choice. Another person says, about wages in California and the USA, what would be your solution to reduce the Gini index? I know this indicator is not everything and that a country's GDP matters. However, I feel the libertarian laissez-faire approach leaves too many people trapped in poverty. What's your opinion? Well, you mentioned two different things there. There's the Gini coefficient, which measures inequality, not poverty. And then there's poverty levels. But under free market capitalism and free trade, levels of absolute poverty have plummeted. In some places, though, inequality has gone up. I'm okay with that. I don't believe in equality in terms of economics, and I care about how absolutely well off people are. I don't buy that your life is worse off just because your neighbor is richer. I think the actual standard of living that you achieve is what matters, and capitalism has done a lot to improve that for even the lowest of the low and the working class and the poor. All right, everybody, that's it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Do hit that like button before you go, and do comment with your thoughts. I read the comments, and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. Plus, if you comment with a super chat or a super thanks, I'll definitely respond on tomorrow's show. And with that, we'll talk again tomorrow.